Palm Beach 8:02 p.m. Lila Vance raises a $40,000 flute to 3 million live stream viewers and laughs. To Mason Keller, may your servers crash faster than your hairline. Across the ballroom, Emma Reed, no seat, no name, no mercy, lets her own glass shatter in her fist. 90 days later, the wedding bells ring, the SEC alert drops, and the Vance empire dies in 11 minutes flat, the bride still wearing the dress. The air in Palm Beach on nights like these didn't just feel expensive. It times tasted, times expensive like spun sugar, and the faint metallic tang of generational wealth about to be leveraged. It was the kind of gala where the chandeliers weren't just crystal. They were statements reflecting the relentless blinding sun of inherited success. I remember the precise moment I saw her. It was the Vance Foundation's annual benefactors ball, the kind of event Emma Reed only ever attended as a prop. I was on Jackson Vance's arm, my hand tucked politely into the crook of his elbow, my smile practiced to mimic the easy confidence of those around me. Jackson, bless his entitled heart, thought he was bringing the exotic, slightly tragic charity case to the party. He never suspected I was the Trojan horse he'd smuggled inside his own fortress. My dress was borrowed a shimmering seafoam green silk that clung in all the right places, purchased by Jackson's credit card, no doubt. Beneath the heady scent of imported gardenias and the faint, lingering musk of institutional cleaning product that seemed to cling to anyone raised by the state, I felt entirely exposed. Then Lila Vance ascended the dais. Lila. The name itself sounded like ice cracking. She was Jackson's elder sister, the reigning queen of the Vance social media domain. She didn't walk. She seemed to be propelled by the sheer gravitational pull of her own ego. She was draped in liquid gold Versace, a fabric that looked poured onto her body rather than sewn. Her hair was a carefully chaotic tumble of blonde, and her smile, that blinding smile, was directed squarely at the 3 million people watching the live stream plastered across every screen in the ballroom. "Oh, darling," she purred into the microphone, the sound rich enough to buy out a small country. She gestured to the empty, opulent chair reserved for her right-hand man, the man whose actual presence was irrelevant, until the applause died down. "We only save seats for people who times matter asterisk." The room responded with that soft, brittle titter of complicity. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but I kept my grip light on Jackson's forearm. Inside the memory of a chipped plastic tray, in a sterile cafeteria hardened into something sharp, Lila pivoted her eyes, sweeping across the head table, until they snagged on the one person in the room who truly held the keys to the kingdom, and who absolutely despised her family, Mason Keller. Mason Keller, the reclusive titan. He looked like a ghost haunting a data center, all sharp angles and silver in his hair, which he seemed determined to deny the existence of. His AI platform core was the only thing keeping Vance Holdings afloat. It was the sophisticated, silent mop cleaning up the swampy mismanagement of Lila's parents. Lila didn't hesitate. She raised her own crystal flute, condensation beating like tiny diamonds. To Mason, she announced, her voice dripping with faux admiration. "The balding king of code, may your servers crash as fast as your hairline." It was a cheap shot aimed low, and it landed perfectly. A few nervous chuckles rippled through the crowd. For me, the sound was catastrophic. It wasn't the insult to Mason. It was the sheer casual cruelty of watching someone destroy something valuable just for sport. My hand clenched around the stem of my champagne flute. It wasn't crystal. It was thick, heavy glass, and under the pressure of that moment, the delicate stem fractured. Asterisk. Crack. Asterisk. A single perfect droplet of my blood. Dark, warm, and startlingly real against the pale champagne swirled into the effervescence like ink dissolving in water. I managed a strained smile, muttered something about needing air, and escaped the blinding light of the head table. The powder room was mercifully quiet, scented only with expensive soap and the faint aroma of panic. I leaned against the cool marble, watching the tiny red bead disappear. I didn't cry. Crying was a luxury I lost, somewhere between the third foster placement and the mandatory group therapy sessions. Instead, I pulled out the cheap burner phone hidden deep in the lining of my borrowed clutch. My thumb hovered over the timer app. 90 days. 90 days until I could stop being Emma Reed, the Stanford dropout, married into the Vance Dynasty, and start being Emma Reed, the architect of their reckoning. I pressed start. The screen blinked *9000000 *. 3 nights later, the universe had recalibrated itself to a much lower frequency. Instead of crystal and silk, I was surrounded by the smell of industrial bleach, trying desperately to mask old beer-broken dreams and the faint metallic hint of desperation. Midtown. A dive bar whose only virtue was its obscurity. Sophia Keller sat across the sticky laminate table. She was 28, and the premature silver streaks cutting through her dark hair made her look less like a disgraced heiress and more like a general who'd seen too many campaigns. She wore a black hoodie, a soft cashmere one. I suspected the kind that cost more than the bar's entire monthly rent pulled low over her eyes. I didn't offer pleasantries. We weren't here for small talk. My father's been looking for an exit strategy from your in-laws for 18 months, Sophia said, her voice low, rough, and carrying the educated cadence of someone who rarely had to shout to be heard. They're leveraged to the hilt on those Miami condos. He thinks they're going to drag core down with them when the bottom drops out. She slid a minuscule object across the table. It was a micro SD card barely visible against the dark wood. This proves they cooked $2 billion in condo valuations. Every falsified ledger, every shell company transfer signed off by Lila's father Jackson's mother. One push of a button, and core exposes it all. It's the kill switch. I picked up the chip, feeling the cold, hard reality of it in my palm. I didn't ask why times she was doing this. I didn't need to. I looked into her eyes, the dark, haunted pools that held an alarming amount of quiet fury, and I recognized the expression. It was the same predatory focus that had kept a 12-year-old perpetually hungry Emma alive in the fluorescent glare of group homes, knowing that if you didn't find the advantage, you became the prey. You want the throne, I stated. Not as a question, but as a professional assessment. Sophia leaned forward the hood, catching the dim light. I want to earn it, she corrected, her gaze unflinching. Help me dismantle my father's liability. Help me prove I don't need his name, and the future control the reins are yours to give. We didn't shake hands. We sealed the alliance with 2 shots of cheap whiskey that burned all the way down the bitterness, a welcome contrast to the saccharine, cloying sweetness of the Palm Beach air I'd just escaped. The next 3 months were a study in controlled dissolution. I became a ghost in my own marriage, a shadow gliding through the gilded cage of the Vance empire. I learned to move through their opulent homes, the Hamptons estate, the sprawling Miami compound, the Manhattan penthouse, with the silent efficiency of a trained infiltrator. My objective wasn't confrontation, it was documentation. I needed the indisputable proof that Lila and her mother, the family's true venomous matriarch, had orchestrated the fraud with gleeful abandon. The first drop was during a Hamptons brunch. The setting was aggressively casual, white linen tablecloths, champagne mimosas, and Lila showing off her new accessories. She had commissioned a new Birkin bag, a magnificent specimen crocodile skin, dyed a shade of unsettling magenta. While Lila was distracted holding court about her new yoga retreat, I casually offered to help clear the scattered napkins. I slipped the micro SD card, the one Sophia had given me, into a seldom-used inner zipper pocket of that ridiculously expensive bag. It felt like tucking a grenade into a silk pillowcase. Jackson was next. My husband was a creature of habit and excess. After a particularly punishing 3-martini lunch discussing his new crypto venture read, Burning Through Inherited Capital, he passed out on the chaise lounge in his study. I lifted his Tesla key fob from the valet tray. It was sleek obsidian black. Inside, nestled among the genuine electronics, was a secondary surgically implanted storage chip, a recent addition to my toolkit. I plugged it into the fob initiated a silent sync, and transferred a 30-second clip from his car's internal memory, a recording of him complaining bitterly about Lila's mother's idiotic accounting methods. But the centerpiece, the trophy required to bring down the entire structure, needed to come from the source of their arrogance. The Vance family safe, hidden behind a Van Gogh reproduction, held the master backups. Lila, in her boundless self-regard, thought her security was impenetrable. She never realized her private Snapchat stories were essentially a daily operational log for her enemies. A week before, she'd posted a giddy video showing off a new diamond necklace. Only one person knows the combination she'd giggled, punching in the numbers while dramatically blowing a kiss to the camera. Mom's birthday, duh. So original. At 3:00 a.m. on a Tuesday, while Jackson snored oblivious in our king-sized bed, I went to work. The safe clicked open silently. Inside, I found the hard drives. I didn't need them all. I only needed the clips demonstrating intent. I pulled out 3 separate recordings, each short, a minute or less, of Lila laughing about creative accounting and sneering about those idiots in Tallahassee who'll never know. I never raised my voice. I never fought. I never betrayed my hand with an argument. I simply documented the rot meticulously, patiently. I waited. The wedding was supposed to be their coronation, the ultimate display of Vance resilience and dominance. Alexander York, the crypto prince, was the trophy husband pick of the year. He had the ephemeral look of success, a meticulously styled man-bun eyes that held the hollow sheen of someone who'd seen his token value collapse several times, and a prenuptial agreement that looked suspiciously one-sided. $10 million was spent on the spectacle. The guest list was a who's who of the financial elite, all desperate to be seen supporting the recovering Vance empire. Vogue had an entire production team stationed beneath a tent that smelled of 1,000 white orchids flown in from Thailand. Lila's gown was rumored to weigh 50 pounds the train, so long it required its own dedicated handler, a young man whose entire job description was to ensure the silk didn't brush the manicured lawn. At 8:17 p.m., precisely as Alexander York, looking pale beneath the filtered light, recited vows that sounded more like a complex merger announcement than a declaration of love, every phone in the tent buzzed simultaneously. It wasn't a text. It was a high-priority, system-wide alert, pushed by Core itself, bypassing normal news feeds and hitting every registered mobile device with the gravity of a national emergency. **SEC. Alert: Vance Holdings indicted securities fraud. Trading halted. **. The string quartet kept playing for exactly 4 bars of Mozart before the sound shattered. Someone near the ice sculpture screamed. In the confusion, a dropped candle too close to the billowing silk of the train caught a single beautiful flame. Lila's wedding dress began to burn slowly, symbolically at the hem. Alexander York didn't look at his bride. He was already fumbling for the satellite phone clipped to his tuxedo jacket. His face a mask of pure, self-preserving panic. He was dumping her mid-ceremony, a final public act of financial repudiation. By 8:08 p.m., the spectacle moved from the tent to the skyline. The monolithic Vance Tower, the obsidian needle that defined the Miami horizon, began its own slow-motion failure. Lights started switching off floor by floor like a dying heartbeat echoing across the coast. 11 minutes. That was the lifespan of the Vance empire, from peak arrogance to total collapse. Weeks later, the silence was different. It was the silence of victory, tinged with the exhaustion of a long war. I stood on the balcony of our new Brooklyn loft. It was modest, clean, and smelled pleasantly of dust, and new paint a sharp contrast to the suffocating opulence I'd left behind. The glass was thick, muffling the sounds of the city, but I could see the dark silhouette of what used to be the Vance crown jewel, now just an empty skyscraper. Jackson found me there. He wasn't wearing a custom-tailored suit. He was in a faded college sweatshirt and jeans, looking less like a dynasty heir and more like a very confused young man who'd misplaced his trust fund. He leaned against the railing beside me, studying the void where his future used to be. "You knew," he said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of fact, delivered with a quiet resignation that was almost worse than anger. I turned the cool breeze catching the loose fabric of my thrift store sundress. I was already 7 months along, and the weight of the future felt wonderfully solidly real. I counted? I replied simply. I had counted the lies, the minutes, the risks, and the precise moment the structure became too rotten to stand. We handled the divorce the way we handled everything else about the end of our alliance cleanly. Jackson signed the papers on a napkin from a Borum Hill diner, the ink bleeding slightly into the cheap paper. There was no prenup to divide. I'd never needed one. My only asset was the knowledge I possessed, and that belonged only to me. Lila's fall was a different kind of spectacle, slower, more viciously public. She was arrested that night, still wearing the scorched remnants of her wedding gown, her heels clacking an awkward rhythm on the cold marble of the courthouse steps. The mugshot went viral instantly. Number Rich Girl Down trended globally for 48 hours. The Vance matriarch disappeared into an anonymous Swiss life. But Lila had no such escape route. She resurfaced 6 months later, surprisingly, teaching a course called Influencer Ethics at a community college in Boca Raton. The salary was $42,000 a year. Her first lecture had 3 students, one of whom was a therapy dog named Buster, hired for emotional support by the administration. Mason Keller, true to form, never spoke to the press. His public acknowledgement of my work was more subtle, more powerful. A small package arrived at the loft-heavy, expensive paper. Inside was a slim Italian leather fountain pen. Engraved on the silver clip was a single perfect word times precision asterisk. Sophia Keller, meanwhile, moved with breathtaking speed. At 29, she took the CEO chair not by inheritance, but by demonstrating superior strategic vision. She restructured CORE, shifting its core mission from pure profit to a public benefit corporation. Her first major initiative was announced with a quiet press release. They were beginning the complex process of converting the toxic, fraudulent Florida condo developments into urgently needed affordable housing. 1 year after the collapse, I was folding tiny clothes in the soft afternoon light, filtering into the Brooklyn nursery. The city outside was loud, vibrant, and entirely new. My cracked iPhone, the one I kept for emergencies, buzzed with a push notification. It was a link from an obscure real estate blog, the kind I used to avoid but now monitored closely. Asterisk, asterisk. Vance Tower, sold for $1. Renamed Empire House. Affordable units open 2026. Asterisk, asterisk. I stared at the headline. $1. The ultimate erasure. The physical symbol of their hubris reduced to a symbolic transaction. I kept my eyes fixed on the screen until the ancient battery finally died, the screen fading to black. Across the river, separating the old world from the new, I walked out onto the balcony. The evening air was cooling, carrying the faint scent of rain. I rested my hand on the firm swell beneath my thrift store sundress, 7 months pregnant, and completely free. I looked out at the panorama of New York City. The lights were coming on, one by one, a million small, deliberate acts of illumination across the darkened boroughs. They weren't the blinding flash of inherited wealth, but the steady, persistent glow of a million small efforts, a new empire, learning slowly, deliberately how to breathe.